Welcome to the Reconnection Club podcast, the show that helps parents heal troubled relationships with their adult sons and daughters. I'm your host, psychotherapist Tina Gilbertson. Each week, I'll offer you compassion, clarity, and personal development tips designed to help you reconnect, not only with your child, but with yourself. Now let's get started. One of the first questions I ask parents who consult with me about estrangement from their adult children is about an apology. I ask, have you offered an apology? And if so, what was the response? Now, the reason I start by talking about apologies is because, firstly, it's often the only thing your child will listen to. And secondly, your child, from what we know, perceives herself not as the perpetrator, but as the victim in this situation. Now, I'm not suggesting that all estranged adult children feel like victims. What I am suggesting is that your child feels justified in cutting you off for some reason. She doesn't feel like the villain in this story. Now, there's not a ton of research in this field, but there is enough to know why people cut off their parents, or at least why they don't. And this is universal. It is not because they want to hurt their parents. Yes, that does happen, but that's not the purpose of the cutoff. The reason they cut off is because they themselves feel hurt by something about the dynamics of the parent-child relationship. And I know that's hard to hear, especially when all you've ever wanted is to do the right thing for your kids. But, no matter how hard parents try, adult children might feel like they're criticized. They might feel like their parents are too much in their lives and not allowing them to be separate or independent. They may have expressed negative feelings about the relationship and been told, well, it's not like that. You're wrong, or you're too sensitive or something, to the point where they feel like their needs don't matter, as though how they feel doesn't matter to their parents. And there are many kinds of interactions that children can experience as painful, even with very well-meaning parents. So assume that your child has created this distance in order to protect herself, not in order to punish or hurt you. And I know sometimes it may feel an awful lot like your child is trying to punish you, but the fact remains that estrangement is initiated and perpetuated by a desire for self-protection. Knowing that, it follows that your child is unlikely to be empathetic to the person or people she feels hurt by, until those people can demonstrate that they understand the harm that's been done, even unintentionally, and take corrective action. This we know from the research. We know that the child is protecting himself or herself. So often, the only effective communication from you, if you're trying to break the barrier of silence, is a good apology that hits all the right notes. A truly good apology can be healing to relationships in a way that nothing else can. But a poor apology can actually be worse than none at all. So I want to talk today about how to make sure your apology is effective and doesn't do more harm than good. And here's the good news. If you've offered apologies in the past that missed the mark, you can apologize today and repair any damage that might have been done. It's not like you get just one chance at this. Now, by the way, one of the worst things you can say if you're really trying to apologize is, I'm sorry you feel that way. After I go through the 3 elements of a good apology, you'll be able to recognize exactly why this is so ineffective. So let's talk about 3 elements of a good apology. There are other bells and whistles you can add, but if any of these 3 are missing, your apology just won't be as effective as it could be. The first thing you need to convey is what you did that you're apologizing for. And you want to be really specific with this. For example, I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm sorry I contacted your boyfriend instead of waiting for you to text me back. I'm sorry I wasn't able to hear you when you tried to express your feelings. Too many parents offer their children an apology that goes more like this: I'm not perfect and I'm sorry. That comes from a good place of wanting to take ownership and accountability, but it's not specific enough. Nobody's perfect, but what did you do that you regret? In addition to being specific, you want to make sure to take ownership of what you did without reservation. I did this, or I should have done such and such, but I didn't. Notice you're not explaining yourself at all. There may come a time for that, but during an apology is really not that time. Just own what you did and leave it at that. That means you're also not blaming anyone else. For example, you're not saying, well, if you texted me back sooner, I wouldn't have had to contact your boyfriend. I mean, that may be true, but it fails the ownership test. Whatever causes us to do the things we do, ultimately, we are responsible for the choices we make and the actions we take. So you want to reflect this complete ownership in your apology. If you don't take ownership, your child will notice and complain, and your apology won't go over well. Which reminds me, make sure your apologies always begin with, I'm sorry I, and never, I'm sorry you. I'm sorry you feel that way. I'm sorry you think that. I'm sorry you don't believe me. There's no ownership there. So always try to begin with, I'm sorry I. So, the first element of a good apology answers the question, what did you do that you're sorry for? Be specific and express 100% responsibility for your own behavior. You may get a chance later to explain and clarify and give some context, but during the apology is not the time. Now, element 2 answers the question, why was it hurtful? What's the harm that was caused? Your child needs to know that you understand why they're upset by what you did. I once saw an apology online from a parent that said something like, I'm sorry I made a picture book of your wedding. Well, that does meet the first criterion of saying what it was that you did that you're sorry for. But there's something missing here, and it's that this mom is not expressing any understanding of why the daughter was upset by that. And I have no knowledge of why the daughter was upset, but I can make something up in my imagination. Like maybe the daughter was going to have a picture book of her wedding made by her best friend, who's a professional artist, and maybe she told her mother that 10 times and asked her mother to leave that project to her friend, and mom ignored that request. And to the extent that that's happened before, where mom has done whatever she wanted, regardless of her daughter's wishes, even where the daughter's preference should take precedence, it will make the daughter furious. More so than if this was the first time mom had ever done something like that. So a good apology from this mom might have gone something like, I'm sorry I made a picture book of your wedding. I knew you didn't want me to because you told me that several times, and I went ahead and did it anyway. That must have been frustrating. Here are some other examples of expressing why what you did was hurtful. I'm sorry I yelled at you, especially because we were in public. It was uncalled for and embarrassing, and I shouldn't have done it. I'm sorry I called your boyfriend instead of waiting for you to text me back. I should not have crossed that boundary. I'm sorry I wasn't able to hear you when you tried to express your feelings. I was being defensive instead of seeking to understand you. It must have hurt to feel so unheard by your own parent. Okay, so now we've got what you did and why it was hurtful. The third element that really needs to be in there is remorse. A good apology includes an expression of remorse. I wish I hadn't said that. I so regret doing that. I hate that I hurt you that way. While you're expressing remorse, if it's genuine, you'll probably be thinking about how to avoid doing the same thing in the future. You can express that along with your remorse. For example, I won't make that mistake again, or if this situation arises again, I'll remember what I did and how badly I hurt you, and I'll make a different choice. Or you can specify the changes you're planning to make. In the future, when you're expressing a feeling, I'll remind myself to try to understand what you're saying rather than defend myself. So those are 3 very important elements of a good apology. Number 1, what did you do? Number 2, why it was hurtful. And 3, you feel remorseful. Going back to, I'm sorry you feel that way, now you know exactly what's missing and why none of us on the receiving end of that ever feel better from hearing it. Until next time, remember that you are a loving, lovable, and still growing human being. So please take good care of yourself. Bye for now. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Reconnection Club podcast, I invite you to check out reconnectionclub.com. The Reconnection Club is for parents at any stage of estrangement from their adult, child, or children. So whether you've just realized there's trouble between you, you've been living with estrangement for years, or you're newly reconciled but still walking on eggshells, the Reconnection Club is your essential resource for information, support, and continued personal growth. With our courses and workshops, expert interviews, monthly Q&A calls, and a friendly, active community, the Reconnection Club is a wonderful place to be for anyone suffering the pain of estrangement from an adult, child, or children. So check it out at reconnectionclub.com.